With more about the attacker and a sinister plot, national security analyst with the Clarion Project, Ryan Morrow. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
This morning. Really, it's been an unsettling 24 hours. I mean, you look at what happened in Minnesota. 8 people stabbed. No question, this was a terrorist attack.
Oh, right, and he's telling you that because when he's saying Allah, he could just mumble that to himself. But no, he's shouting it. That's a way of saying, this is my motivation and this is why I'm doing this type of thing. So we don't need to speculate about this, that he had jihadist motivations because he told us that. But then the problem that arises is, how do you cover it when you're in the media? Because the way these guys radicalize others is through the perception of success. And so the way I handle it is we'll talk about an attack like this, but also mention the broader context that ISIS is losing territory, for example, in Iraq and Syria. That is also part of the story.
So this man apparently asked his victims before he stabbed them, "Are you a Muslim?" Kind of hard at that point to deny the religious quality to this conflict, right? This is not a secular conflict.
They'll find a way. Just watch. In the coming days, what's going to happen is someone will find something that went wrong in his background, some sign of mental illness, some way someone harmed him or hurt his feelings, and they'll say, well, that's really the root cause, because for whatever reason, there's this big movement to deny the obvious fact that the problem is the ideology.
When you say for whatever reason, what are the reasons? Because it is striking, the refusal of people to connect obvious dots. What is that about?
A lot of it can be partisanship. A lot of it can be just the fact that it's so hard for us to swallow that idea that someone can adopt this ideology. And as Americans, we cannot relate to that. What do we relate to? The idea that harm, poverty, and things like that cause crime and people to go insane.
Right, and that's the reality we live in, is these lone wolf attacks that we're facing. They may not even be talking to ISIS, but they claim to be part of them. That's the challenge. Some people say, well, it may not be terrorism, but it all is. Right? I mean, if they're doing an attack like that, that's terrorism.
Yeah, one of the things we have to be looking at also is that the lone wolves usually don't really exist. When you look at the studies, they're almost always talking to someone, even if it's just online and meeting with them. Someone's radicalizing them and teaching them their complex ideology. In many cases, they also have someone that they meet with face-to-face that's egging them on. So if there's a social process here, people interacting, we have to ask, who radicalized the individual? Who was he talking to when he had doubts? Who did he go to address them?
So what's so striking about the cluster of terror events in Minnesota is a lot of them have implicated people who were born here. Their parents came here as refugees, so they're not ISIS plants. They didn't escape vetting.
Exactly.
What do you do about that?
Well, usually when they become violent radicals, there's a radicalization process that precedes that. You have to have this broad worldview that is anti-American, believes in creating an Islamic state, and then the added factor is, will you pursue that through violence? So there does have to be ideological vetting on that basis, but there is a problem here where there can be someone that doesn't embrace that ideology, isn't even thinking about ideology at all. They come to the United States, they move from one location to the next, and then they have an identity crisis when they're a teenager and they get wrapped up with the wrong person.
Doesn't it suggest something is wrong with the community from which they're coming? I mean,
oh, sure.
I mean, what is that community? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you. You're the expert here.
Right. But well, for example, the Somali community, there's been a lot of problems with having radical clerics there. You hear about clashes between some Somali activists that say, look, we've got to clean up what's going on here, and then they get condemned even as Islamophobes, even if they're Muslims themselves. There's been programs put forth for de-radicalization, and then you hear about local community leaders saying, no, you're focusing on ideology, that's offensive, what we need are after-school programs.
Do those work?
No, there is no evidence indicating that they work at all.
Rhetorical question.
I know,
Thank you for confirming that.
It's a frightening reality that we face. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, the pressure cooker discovered on the scene in New York last night was very similar to what we saw during the Boston Marathon bombing. Still ahead, the man who led the investigation there into the Tsarnaev brothers will join us.
But up next, Trump's chief military advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, joins us to react to all of this breaking news this morning. Stick with us.
A Fox News alert. We've been monitoring all morning a city right here in New York that is in high alert because of a number of incidents last evening.
Yeah, that's for sure. And joining us now is General Michael Flynn, who is a key national security advisor, maybe the key national security advisor to the Trump campaign. General, it's great to see you this morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of this? You had the bomb go off in Chelsea. You had this apparent bomb found several blocks to the north, and then you had a pipe bomb go off in New Jersey. Does that suggest to you some kind of coordination or a larger picture?
Yeah, so first, a couple of things. And I think that Mayor de Blasio, he made a statement last night that said there's no credible threat reporting or anything like that. That's not a correct statement. The more precise statement would be is that there's no specific reporting on this particular type of attack that was going to happen. But there's a lot of credible threat reporting on these types of attacks all over this country, particularly here in New York. New York has always remained a target. So there is credible reporting that these types of attacks are going to occur. Second, the Islamic State has put out very recently, in the last couple of weeks, they've put out lessons learned from a whole series of attacks from Nice to Orlando, and they've said that there's two things that we want to do. We want to strike fear into the hearts of our enemy, that's us, and we want to affect things that benefit them, like tourism. So tourism is actually a target, and that's one of the things that obviously I think in the area that was chosen for Chelsea.
How important is it for political leaders to come out early on and call it for what it was? Because you had Donald Trump who said, this was a bombing, was the first to come out to say that, got a lot of criticism. I mean, you're someone who's, helping advising on his team. Yeah. How important is that?
Well, I think it's important to just to not dance around what it is. I mean, this was a terrorist attack. We will, the law enforcement professionals will peel back and do the forensics and figure out whether it was ISIS-inspired or ISIS-directed or whatever. I mean, the one that happened up in Minnesota, that's pretty clear. Mm-hmm. So they'll figure that out. But this was clearly a terrorist attack. I think the stepping back and kind of looking at it from the 60,000-foot level, I mean, this week we have the UN General Assembly in town. They're all arriving. All the presidents, prime ministers, kings are all arriving this weekend for a major set of speeches this particular week at the UN. Are they going to talk about climate change and global warming, or are we going to talk about this really unbelievable international problem that we have, which is this violent terrorism, the radicalization of the Islamic world and the terrorist attacks that are occurring, whether or not this specific one was a radicalized Islamic terrorist attack or not. We have an international problem that is growing, and we can't just blow this thing off again. And I think that's what they ought to be talking about during this UN week here, when they're all getting up there making these big speeches. I hope we're not going to go in there and talk about climate change. I hope we go in there and talk about how do we defeat this enemy.
Well, in general, you go back to the last presidential campaign in 2012, President Obama was running for re-election in part by saying Al-Qaeda was on the run. Yeah. And then after that told the New Yorker that ISIS is the JV squad. Yeah. Where are we today?
We have a problem. I mean, this type of threat that we're facing, and again, exactly what we're seeing. I mean, what you saw in New Jersey at this Marine Corps run, and again, these things are going to continue to happen. We have got to be very, very brutally honest with the American public as to what is happening, and we can't tiptoe around what we're calling certain things. That's actually dangerous, and it's a disservice to the American public. What we have to be is we have to be brutally honest. We are facing a threat, and it is an international threat. The Arab world has got to come to grips with this thing. The Muslim world has got to come to grips with this thing. I think there are brave leaders out there in the Arab world. People like President al-Sisi out of Egypt is one of them. We should embrace the kind of speeches that he's been given, and the kind of actions that he's been taking against organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood. So we have a problem when these leaders get together, like they're going to get together starting today and tomorrow and Tuesday through Wednesday. We have got to, they have got to have the guts to speak up about this. Right. And our leadership has to have the guts to speak up about this. So we're at a place now where it's not about what is happening, it's why it's happening, and then we have to get after this problem.
It's funny, if you took an al-Sisi speech and read it out loud in this country, you'd be denounced by the Obama administration as an Islamophobe. So Trump has taken a lot of heat for his remarks about refugees, saying it imperils America to import large numbers of people from majority Muslim countries. Do you think this spate of terror attacks and plots in Minnesota over the past couple of years vindicate his position?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to take a real hard look at where are the refugees coming from? How are they coming into the country? Who's paying attention to them? How are they assimilating into our own society? All the things that we want people to do when they enter this country. I mean, and the whole idea about coming in legally or refugees and where we're going to place refugees and how we're going to place them, who's going to pay attention to them. So the answer is yes. And we have to be very conscious about these large numbers that we're bringing in from places where we really don't have any idea who they are.
And that's the reality we face with a lot of people waking up this morning feeling unsettled about things.
Yeah.
Well, you know, what is the next thing that's going to happen? You look at what happened yesterday in Minnesota, the slasher screaming Allah, stabbing 8 different people.
Right.
How should we all be thinking about where we're at in our fight against terror? Because now we are dealing with a new reality of these lone wolves, and it's really hard to figure out when and where that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't believe in the concept of a lone wolf. There's wolves operate in packs, you know, whether they're inspired or directed by whatever groups. You know, so I think the lone wolf is just a buzz phrase that we use because somebody else always knows when somebody's going to conduct an attack. You know, what I would tell you is that the principal concept behind terrorism, particularly radical Islamic terrorism, because they've written about it and they've preached about it, is to strike fear in the hearts of the enemy, wherever they live. They recently put out a message to go after children where they play. Not, because it's hard to get after the law enforcement professionals. It's hard to attack firemen or police officers or those that have some means of protecting themselves. So I mean, this is a real problem in this country. We have to pay more attention to what they're saying because what they say, they actually do. And this is a really important thing. And we have to get back to the why this is happening and then go after that why. And it's because there is a disease in the Islamic ideology. And it's a cancerous disease that has metastasized. It's an international problem. You just had Mayor Giuliani on here, and I've said this many times. You've got the director of the FBI that has said we have 1,000 cases going on in this country in all 50 states. I mean, what's going on? So we have to pay attention to the refugees that are coming into this country. We have to pay attention to the undocumented or illegals that are in this country. And we have to pay attention to what is happening overseas as well because the problem's getting worse.
Quick question. You served with Bob Gates as defense secretary. Yeah. He wrote an op-ed that was scathing against Donald Trump yesterday. And Donald Trump tweeted last night, "Never liked dopey Robert Gates. Look at the mess the U.S. is in. Always speaks badly of his many bosses, including Obama." Do you agree with something like that? I know you support Donald Trump, but attacking the former defense secretary like that?
Yeah, I mean, I read that. I mean, why did he even write the article? He said Hillary's bad. He said, you know, really disparaging things about Donald Trump, a person who he's never met. Now, he's met Hillary, so what he said about Hillary is probably very true. I can tell you what he said about Donald Trump is not true. Trump is a great guy. He's a great leader. And what we need right now is we need leadership in this country. I really, you know, I'm gonna keep my mouth this time because I'm normally pretty blunt about what I feel on, but I really think that he wasted his time writing that op-ed.
Right.
Retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. We appreciate your insights this morning.
Good to see you, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.
Well, the press already attacking Trump for calling last night's blast a bombing. Their reaction to Hillary for saying the same thing was quite different. We've got a panel here to talk it out. Stay tuned.
Just before I got off the plane, a bomb went off in New York, and nobody knows exactly what's going on. But, boy, we are living in a time. We better get very tough, folks. We better get very, very tough. Just happened. So we'll find out. But it's a terrible thing that's going on in our world and in our country. And we are going to get tough and smart and vigilant, and we're going to end it. We're going to end it. So we'll see what it is. We'll see what it is.
I've been briefed about the bombings in New York and New Jersey and the attack in Minnesota. Obviously, we need to do everything we can to support our first responders, also to pray for the victims. We have to let this investigation unfold. We've been in touch with various officials, including the mayor's office in New York, to learn what they are discovering as they conduct this investigation. And I'll have more to say about it when we actually know some facts.
Well, fair and balanced, you get to hear both sides there, and moments after all of that, or as it was happening, the media quick to judge Donald Trump for using the term bombing to describe what happened right here in New York City. But nobody complained when Hillary Clinton used the exact same term, as you heard. Our political panel is here live right now. Democratic strategist Harlan Hill, Real Clear Politics political reporter Caitlin Huey Burns, and GOP strategist John Burnett. Good to see all of you. Harlan, I assume you believe that this is a contrast in leadership.
Well, to be honest with you, I think that what's happening is that the media and the Clinton campaign know that she can't win on policy and merit. And so what they're attempting to do is to make this a referendum on Donald Trump, on his fitness to be president, when they're talking about words that he's using to describe clearly what was a terrorist attack. And they're making that the central issue as opposed to the event. That says a lot. And it says that, you know, when you look at the polling, she doesn't win on terrorism. He clearly outperforms on terrorism. And so if we're talking about the specifics of the implication of terrorism, whether it's radical Islamic terrorism or otherwise, she can't win there, so she needs to talk about the semantics.
And Caitlin, to Harlan's point, does this play right into the message from the Clinton camp that Donald Trump will shoot first and ask questions later?
I think it does. He said that it was a bombing without having, you know, we didn't know the details at that point. And that's where the criticism comes from, this kind of, this quick reaction from Donald Trump when it comes to these issues. Now, we have seen him do well in the polls after these kinds of attacks because of that rhetoric. But Clinton is certainly fearing that this kind of underscores her point, to your point, about temperament, fitness to serve, knowing all the facts before you talk about them.
One point on that, pardon me, one second, I just want to be clear about one point, which is that Donald Trump, before what we played, before that, he also said he had just gotten a briefing on his plane. Now, I don't know, he didn't clarify whether it was staff briefing him, or we now know that both candidates have been briefed several times by the intelligence community. I'm not assuming he got a cell phone briefing from the CIA director, but he did say he got some kind of briefing. So it wasn't like he just came out there with no information.
Right, but my point is that we don't know exactly what happened yet, still today, what the facts are at this moment in time. But Clinton is certainly figuring that, you know, if she can point to this as a temperament issue, that works in her favor. And he's figuring that, you know, he's been campaigning on this kind of thing, this idea of anxiety, national insecurity, and so that could help him in that regard.
And John, Hillary Clinton looked like she had just not come from an event in Washington where she gave a speech, but it looked like she just came from the 3 days of rest and had just gotten out of bed. It looked like she was falling asleep.
Yeah, it looks like she needs an iced latte. But, you know, this is beyond a breaking news story. You know, I actually worked in 5 World Trade Center during the bombing, and I was there in 7 World Trade Center during the attack. So this is real to me. And I would have to respectfully disagree. We need to call these things exactly what they are. It's terrorism, whether it's radical or whether it's homegrown within our borders. I think that by clearly defining it, we can actually, you know, settle people's nerves, saying that, look, we're on the job. We have to gather the facts, but it is an act of terror.
John makes a strong point there, Harlan.
Absolutely.
Does that play into Trump's message?
I thoroughly agree with you. When I saw de Blasio engaging in just Orwellian doublespeak, saying that, yeah, there was another device found, it was an intentional explosion, but it's not terror. Right. You know, you're defining terrorism.
Right. If you make a bomb, it's intentional.
And it's
right,
intentional. And there are other devices, at least at the time they thought.
Right. And we're fortunate that there were no lives taken in these situations.
Yeah,
we're very lucky.
But let's get to the race, Caitlin. I mean, the broader picture here, not to just throw politics into terror. It happens, unfortunately. But let's broaden the lens. This week, this race shifted big time, and all of a sudden, Donald Trump was rising, not just in the national polls, but these battlegrounds like Ohio and Florida. This is a whole new race.
Absolutely. He's certainly narrowed the gap nationally and in battlegrounds like you mentioned. He is proving to be competitive with Hillary Clinton at this point. I would argue, though, how he ended the week by reigniting the kind of the birtherism issue. I think that will play in this week. Clinton has a lot.
Making a face as if he did not reignite it. Harlan, quick.
He didn't reignite it. He was in a Washington Post interview. They brought it up. He didn't want to answer it because it's not an issue in this campaign. It's not the foundation.
He had a news event to talk about it.
Exactly, and he didn't answer questions. He actually promoted more questions than
he
answers.
He made a very conclusive statement by saying, look, this is what it is, period.
And then he dropped the mic and said, I'm going to make America great again.
After 5 years.
Now, part of the reason why Donald Trump's rising in the polls has been he's doing the teleprompter thing, and he's not speaking off the cuff. And then I noticed yesterday, now that he's either tied or leading in these polls, he's back on Twitter. He calls Robert Gates dopey. He calls Maureen Dowd from the New York Times neurotic. Are you Republicans going to keep him off Twitter or what?
You know, that's a big challenge. However, I think that Hillary's been falling for weeks. In the polls, that is. Yeah. No pun intended.
Okay. You got to clarify. We want to be clear.
And, Hillary is actually concerned. She can't win the millennial vote. We'll see what her plan is come Monday with respect to trying to reach out. Bernie hasn't really went on the campaign to really campaign for her. He's starting to, but it's kind of weak. But look, she's falling in the polls. She has 2 presidents. She has a major contender that based upon the fact that the system was rigged, he never had a chance. But still, she has all these surrogates, and she still can't make up the ground.
John, Caitlin, Harlan, we really appreciate your time this morning, and we are 8 days away from the first debate where this is going to get even more exciting.
They say this actually pulls to attract more viewers than the Super Bowl.
We'll see. more viewers even than we have this morning, which is shocking. Thanks for joining us. New York City's mayor says the bombing was intentional but not terror, as we just said. Now, the former NYPD commissioner, Bernie Kerik, will join us live to react just ahead. And the pressure cooker discovered right here in New York City last night is very similar to what we saw during the Boston Marathon bombing. The man who led that investigation into the Tsarnaev brothers joins us live next.
We're back now. Some headlines this morning. The Chelsea explosion comes the same week that world leaders are gathering here in Manhattan, New York City, and it's on high alert for the UN General Assembly, which kicks off on Tuesday. Police officers have already been in position outside the UN headquarters, but they say they have not been given any special alert or instructions following that blast. And now to a Fox News alert. 4 members of a South Carolina football team are killed. Dozens rush to the hospital after their bus slams right into a highway overpass.
Oh my God. Oh my God, it's a big bus. Oh my God.
You can see there the equipment scattered about Interstate 74 just north of Charlotte, where the bus crashed on its way to Fayetteville from Rama JUCO Academy. Well, family members and friends following the bus watched in horror as some victims were ejected. Others crawled through shattered windows. Right now, officials say a front tire may have blown, causing the driver to lose control. And hell-bent on hurting cops, that is what police are now saying about the gunman who went on a deadly rampage in Philadelphia. The suspect, you can see there, killing a woman and wounding 5 others, including 2 officers. Authorities finding a hate-filled letter at the scene.
Investigators at the scene found an envelope that on the outside was marked doomed. That letter that he has is a bunch of rambling, which indicates his hatred for police officers.
The gunman, 25-year-old Nicholas Glenn, was killed during an alley shootout with police. Glenn, who had 16 prior arrests, was well known to authorities. And the Presidential Debate Commission now banning earpieces from moderators after Matt Lauer's forum with the 2 nominees. Critics say Lauer unfairly pressed Hillary Clinton on her email scandal while going too easy on Donald Trump. Well, Lauer was reportedly being fed questions through his earpiece during that forum. Those are some of your headlines this morning.
I think Matt Lauer did a great job in that forum because regardless of all the noise, he drew out both of these candidates. Hillary Clinton made news, and voters learned more about her email situation, her truthfulness, and in terms of Donald Trump, he was on the defensive on a number of issues as well.
I mean, let's be honest here. They're trying to intimidate future moderators. Right. That was the purpose of attacking poor Matt Lauer like he's some right-winger, like he's not what he appears to be, which is a conventional liberal, obviously.
Well, you just can't win, though, as a moderator, right? You're trying to please your execs. You're trying to please the American people. You're also trying to make the candidates feel comfortable. It's a really tough job.
Why have them? I don't understand that. If you had no moderators and you just had the 2 candidates, would you learn more about them?
You need someone to guide the conversation. This is why I'm glad Chris Wallace, our own Chris Wallace, is one of the moderators, because he's not going to take this BS. He's not going to worry about what everyone says. He's going to do a good job. And that's the point. Don't listen to the noise.
Our producer, Sean Groman, just said, speaking of producers in your ear, telling you things, I'm
going to take this off. I can't hear Sean. I can't hear him. Coming up, the pressure cooker discovered in New York last night is very similar to what we saw during the Boston Marathon bombing. The man who led the investigation into the Tsarnaev brothers joins us next.
I heard boom, boom, and everything started shaking, and there was big mounds of smoke, and people started running, and I started running with them down 7th Avenue.
We're back with the Fox News alert. The NYPD ordering residents away from their windows as they investigate a wired pressure cooker found near the first blast.
It's reportedly the same kind of device used by the Boston Marathon bombers. So what do we know about it, and what does this mean for the investigation? The former Boston Superintendent-in-Chief of Police, Daniel Lynskey, led the investigation for the Boston Marathon bombing. He joins us live now. Good morning, Daniel. We wonder, when you look at these pictures, does it seem like the exact type that we saw in the Boston Marathon bombing, or are there some differences that we should note?
There's some differences from what I see in the potential initiation device being a phone. In the Boston Marathon bombing, it was a remote-controlled car that they utilized. But the basic makeup is the same. It comes right off of Al-Qaeda's Inspire magazine. You can go to a local hardware store and get everything you need to attack a city.
So as a mechanical matter, what's the advantage of a pressure cooker?
Pressure cooker contains the explosion, and the cooker itself becomes pieces of shrapnel when it blows apart. It also can be lined, as it was in our attack, with BBs and nails and other shrapnel that they put inside. So it's a cheap, inexpensive way that you can get a pretty high explosive with a decent blast radius to maximize injuries.
So you have a few things that have gone on in the past 24 hours. Starting yesterday at 9:30 in New Jersey, you had a pipe bomb there right before a 5K was about to start with Marines there. And then last night at 8:30, you had the bomb that went off on 23rd and 6th Avenue right here in New York, and then a few blocks north on 27th. You look at all of those incidents, what are the chances that they happened by the same person, that there was a coincidence there?
Yeah, bombings are few and far between, thank God, in the United States. So the short time frame for these events in a relatively small geographical area that they're separated, it's very possible for somebody to have delivered a device and driven from the New York side to the New Jersey side to the New York side very quickly. Authorities are going to be leaning towards finding out if there's similar construction, similar material, similar pattern between here, New York and New Jersey. Authorities are going to be working with the FBI to determine if there's a connection here. It's unlikely you'd have these number of events in that short period of time and not have it connected.
And Daniel, we've spoken to other experts this morning saying that when a pressure cooker goes off, in this case it did not, and it did not injure anyone, thankfully, but there are specific markings in what's put together, and that will help the investigation. Based on your experience, can you walk our viewers through how you piece something like this together?
You go over the physical pieces of evidence. So the unexploded device, you're going to look for latent evidence, DNA evidence, any forensics you can find on that. You're going to look for the materials, any serial numbers, maybe place of manufacture, place it was sold. We were able to backtrack and identify the stores that the Tsarnaev brothers went to and all the materials they used, where they got each one of the materials. So they'll be looking at...
Daniel Lynskey, I think we lost him on our feed from Boston. We appreciate him coming on.
Some great insights.
It seems like there's an awful lot of evidence going to come off on unexploded.
Well, and someone who knows well, who really handled everything after the Boston bombing, so we appreciate him taking the time to join us this morning.
We've got a lot more coming up this morning. How the rest of the press is covering the political fallout from last night's attacks. Howie Kurtz joins us at the top of the hour. He's been on that.
And our coverage of the New York City bombing will not stop. We are live at the scene with the latest details. And here on the couch, former NYPD Commissioner Bernie Kerik joins us live.
Good morning. It is Sunday, September 18th. I'm Abby Huntsman, and this is a Fox News alert. A massive manhunt underway this morning after a person responsible sets off a bomb right in the middle of Manhattan. Nearly 30 people are injured, and this woman walking away from the scene with shrapnel in her shoulder. Police now searching for more devices, and everyone is now asking, was this terror?
Interesting. This is
a picture this morning.
Very remarkable morning. I mean, I was walking with my wife after dinner last night through the streets of New York City last night, and you know, it's normal in some senses. You hear sirens going in every direction. That's kind of a normal Saturday night in New York City. It's happening all the time. But last night it was much more intense. I spoke to one police officer this morning. As you know, there are a lot of officers around the hotel. We normally stay out here in New York City, and they were saying they are on high alert. And it was all hands on deck, that a lot of officers had been called in overnight, obviously, to get on top of this. And someone who's been on top of it for us is David Lee Miller, who's live on the scene right now. Everyone wanting to know where the NYPD is in this investigation this morning, David.
Well, the NYPD, as of now, says that they have not identified any suspects, and they continue, they say, to search for potential other explosive devices. This now, as there is a massive police presence. Let me give you a quick look at this neighborhood, Chelsea. This is the corner of 5th Avenue and 23rd Street. Normally a very busy east-west artery, even on Sunday morning. Here you can see two officers preventing any traffic from going down the street and then all the way down the street, which is the site of where the blast took place. You can see floodlights and a massive police presence. I talked to one of the officers who is on the scene. He said that he has now been on the clock for over 18 hours. He came on duty yesterday afternoon, and he has remained on the clock ever since and has no idea when he is going to get any type of a break. And now, as this investigation takes place here at 23rd Street, authorities are looking at surveillance video. hoping that they will be able to not only see the blast itself, and we've seen this video a number of times this morning, but they're hoping that some of the surveillance video will also reveal the perpetrator or perpetrators. Additionally, 4 blocks from here, a few hours after the explosion took place, authorities found what appeared to be another explosive device, this one constructed of a pressure cooker and with a cell phone attached. According to at least one published report, there was a note attached to this device. We do not know if that piece of paper actually had any writing on it or what in fact it did say. We are also told that this potential other explosive device has been removed. It is now in an NYPD facility in the Bronx. Authorities say that as of this hour, they have not yet detonated this other potential explosive device. Last night, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio came to the scene shortly after the first blast, and he told New Yorkers that this is not an accident, but he did not make any direct link to terror. Listen.
The early indications, the initial indications is this was an intentional act. Whatever the cause, whatever the intention here, New Yorkers will not be intimidated. We have the best police force in the country and a number of other key agencies, FDNY, OEM, etc., making sure we will be safe.
And another piece of the puzzle that is being examined today, yesterday morning, not far from here in Seaside Park, New Jersey, a pipe bomb exploded shortly before a charity race was to take place, a race that would benefit.
All right, David Lee Miller's shot has gone down. We are joined now on the couch by the former police commissioner of New York City, Bernie Kerik. Bernie, it's great to see you this morning. So you ran the largest law enforcement agency in America. You know how these things unfold. Assess the mayor's response, telling us this is an intentional act.
Well, that's obvious, or it should be obvious. You know, the one problem I have with the mayor's statement, he said there's no credible threat to New York City.
How do you know that?
Okay, but that's not true. There's no specific threat, all right? He has no specifics on any threat to New York at this time. There is a credible threat, an extremely credible threat to New York City and the entire United States of America by ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and a number of other radical Islamic groups that make these threats constantly. They tell us, I mean, you have to be a fool or naive or just plain stupid not to realize there's a credible threat. They want the demise of this country, Christianity, the demise of Israel, countries that live in, you know, in freedom. That's what they want. They continue to say it. So don't say there's not a credible threat. They have proved their credibility in Orlando, in San Bernardino, on 9/11. They have credibility.
You said a little earlier that you thought we would get to the bottom of this, NYPD would get to the bottom of this within 24 hours. We want to be patient. A couple more hours have passed. How do you get to the bottom of this? What are some of the things they're looking for this morning? I mean, David Lee Miller was saying that one of the things they're on alert for, of course, would be more devices in the city. I take it it's a good sign that about 12 hours almost have passed, thankfully, without another device found out there. However, is a big city, and we don't know what else is out there.
Well, we don't know what else is out there, but the immediate area, and that's how they found the second device, you know, the police department goes into overdrive in looking for secondary and tertiary devices and things like that. So that's already been done. The forensics on the device that detonated inside the dumpster, they'll take that stuff and rip it to shreds today to figure out what it was, who placed it there, why. If the other device, the pressure cooker, if that thing is real, if it's determined to be real, and it's related, that's where they're going to get most of their forensics from. Latent prints, manufacturers,
because it did not explode.
Numbers. Right, exactly. You can take a lot of information out of that and come up with where it was sold, who purchased it, when, so forth and so on.
And you have a lot of video cameras on almost every street now in New York City that can be super helpful. But you think about a place like 23rd and 6th Avenue, a street that I used to live on. I've got a number of friends that live there. And this is a place that's full of apartments, grocery stores, restaurants, bars. And you think 8:30 p.m. last night, people are just out living their lives, doing what they normally do. And they wake up this morning, people are just on edge because you think about just walking out of your apartment building and not feeling safe. How should people be thinking about this morning?
You know what? People are on edge, but you have to live in a world of reality today. I get calls last night. The first thing somebody says to me is, "Are you surprised?" No, I'm not surprised. Whether this is a domestic terror event, whether it's just some kook that did this, or it's an inspired event or some lone wolf, if you will, it doesn't make any difference to me. I'm not surprised that these types of things happen. We have to live in that world of reality. These things are going to happen probably for decades to come, especially on the radical Islamic front, until we annihilate this type of enemy.
Is there anything we can do as Americans? Because authorities, they've done a great job here, the first responders here in New York City, but just everyday Americans walking the streets, if they see something, is there anything more we can do to be helpful?
Don't be afraid to say something. We've created this political correct atmosphere where people are scared to death to call in a complaint and say, this guy, he's doing something suspicious and he looks like a Muslim. Well, right away, he looks like a Muslim. Nobody wants to say that. The bottom line is, if you see something, if you have a gut reaction to it, then call the police and let them make a determination.
But it's not just civilians who have problems acting on common sense. You see law enforcement at the airport. You see them patting down grandmothers and babies. I mean, ignoring the obvious in favor of the theoretical.
It's a combination between policy and, politics.
So how much politics is there? I mean, how much pressure does this mayor in New York put on his police department to act a certain way?
A lot. Every mayor, every governor, the president of the United States, the policy is driven from the top. Fortunately for us, we had Bill Bratton. Jimmy O'Neill, the new commissioner here, is a great guy, knows the job well.
This happened on his first day.
On his first day.
Right.
Welcome to the slot. But, he's a guy that can handle the job, and he'll do well.
What are your thoughts as well on the debate about privacy? Obviously, people have justifiable concerns about surveillance cameras on practically every corner in this city. On the other hand, when something like this happens, that is invaluable to figuring out who's the terrorist behind this, or they're more terrorists, and preventing future attacks.
You know what? I think you have to look at the world of reality. It's a public street. Everybody has a right to privacy when it's private. A public street corner is not a private location. Midtown Manhattan, I can tell you, Times Square, it's almost like a casino. I don't think there's 6 inches of property anywhere in Times Square that they can't take a camera and read the time off your watch.
And yet I've never won a single dollar walking through Times Square.
He lost a lot, though. He did lose a lot in Times Square.
Bernie Kerik, it's great to see you. Thank you for that perspective.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here. All right, we do have some other headlines to get to this morning. And starting with the Fox News alert, a man shot dead by an off-duty police officer after going on a stabbing spree inside a mall. Police in St. Cloud, Minnesota say a man dressed in a private security uniform referred to Allah during this attack, asking at least one victim if they were Muslim. 8 people were injured, one of them still in the hospital this morning. All victims are expected to survive, and terrorism has not been ruled out there. Well, tensions between the U.S. and Russia simmering overnight after reports the U.S. airstrikes may have accidentally hit Syrian military forces just hours ago. The UN Security Council holding an emergency meeting at Russia's request. The United States expressing regret, saying the target appeared to be ISIS terrorists, and then slamming Russia for what it calls an outrageous political stunt. Listen.
Seriously? And they're calling this emergency meeting? Really? Imagine how often this council would be meeting if we were to gather every time the regime or Russia struck a hospital or a school.
The ceasefire agreement in Syria's civil war is still fragile, but it is holding. And Black Lives Matter now facing some serious consequences for messages like this one. Well, the Black Lives Matter is now being sued by a black Dallas police officer. Sergeant Demetric Penny claims Black Lives Matter and their supporters have incited a, quote, race war and violence against police. Al Sharpton, George Soros, President Obama, and Hillary Clinton all named in that lawsuit. Well, 5 Dallas officers were killed during an ambush at the end of a Black Lives Matter protest back in July. And we are learning who will be helping the VP candidates prep for their upcoming debate. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker is trying out his acting skills as Democratic VP nominee Tim Kaine as he helps Mike Pence get ready. And helping Tim Kaine with his debate prep is Washington super lawyer Bob Barnett. He's going to be taking on the role of Mike Pence. Barnett previously played Senator Bernie Sanders in mock debate sessions for Hillary Clinton during the Democratic primaries.
Boy, there's a turn.
Wow.
Bernie Sanders to Mike Pence.
It's hard to see Bob Barnett playing Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
You know
I kind of want to be a fly in the wall in that.
Is he a lawyer?
I work with Bob.
Yes.
Can you see it?
I can see him playing Bernie Sanders. I can see him doing the whole Bernie hands thing, but he's no Larry David. I mean, Bob's a good lawyer.
Yeah,
but
no one's
Washington's a
Larry
small
David.
town, as you may have noticed.
Coming up, it's still an active manhunt for the suspect or suspects responsible for last night's bombing. We're sending Geraldo Rivera to the scene of the crime. He'll join us straight ahead, live.
But up next, a survivor speaks out. An eyewitness who was walking by on 23rd Street when the blast went off last night shares his story with us.
I heard boom, boom, and everything started shaking. I was in Iraq and a bomb dropped. That's what it sounded like.
I'm scared that I had to be a part of something so severe, and also that I almost didn't see my son. That's the part that got me the most.
We're back with the Fox News Alert. New York